So I'm thinking that right about now would be an excellent time to admit something, and that is that in 37 years of being around business-to-business sales, I have never seen a time where it's more difficult to get an appointment with somebody that you don't know. And that's saying something, because we've been through some pretty challenging times. You know, back in the day when nobody even had an email and nobody had ever heard of LinkedIn, didn't even exist. Things were so much easier. You could just call somebody on the phone and basically say, hey, I'm going to be in your area. Yeah, stop by and let's have a cup of coffee, It was so easy because it seemed like that people just had a little bit more time in their day or something, time in their life. But today, it's so different. At one point, I think that we could call up and ask for an appointment so we could do some selling. And today it seems like that we have to do some selling before we can ever get the appointment. And so in the last few years, I've really been transitioning over to teaching a completely different way of approaching, especially prospects that we don't know, using digital assets. And here's the thinking. Gartner came out with a little study a couple of years ago that said that the average buyer spends something like 17% of their time in their overall buying process actually meeting with would-be vendors and suppliers, which means that 83% of their time, they're not meeting with suppliers and potential vendors. So what are they doing? Well, they're doing some research online, they're having internal meetings, they're getting most of the information that they will make decisions concerning by accessing information without talking to a person, which is pretty incredible when you think about it, that that's even possible. But we have to look as buyer behavior is changing dramatically. It really needs to change the way that we sell. And I published a book back in 2004 called Think Like Your Customer. And it just seems to me that if we're not willing to think the way customers think today and engage them in the way that they buy today, then I think we're tone deaf. We're stuck in the past. And we're not in a place where we can really align with the way that buyers want to buy and engage. And so this idea of digital assets, certainly not a brand new idea, but let me make a couple of quick points about this. And that is, we're not just talking about a white paper necessarily, or some sort of a nice little graphic that we can post on LinkedIn. Digital assets have to do some very specific things. We have to raise questions that the customer wouldn't think to ask themselves. And then number two, we have to provide answers to those questions, or maybe even answers to questions that they had thought to ask themselves. And so we can transition into a place now where the early part of a conversation that you might have when you sit down with a client, a lot of that has to happen asynchronously. So synchronous would be when I'm sitting down talking to somebody face to face, live on the telephone, video conference, what have you. But asynchronous is when I'm going to write or record something at one point in time, and the client's going to read, watch, or listen to it at a later point in time. And I dare say that as I work with salespeople, what I see is a hesitance to really go all in on asynchronous selling. Now, I get it. What we'd like to have is an appointment to talk to the client face to face. And that's what we all want. In fact, I had a gentleman in one of my workshops say, Bill, I don't want to do all this digital selling stuff. I just want the appointment. And I'm thinking, well, duh. Of course we want the appointment, but you have to earn the appointment in a different way. We have to make it worthwhile for them to meet with us in the first place. And the only way they're going to determine whether or not we're worth meeting is to share some information and put them in a position where they believe if they met with us, they could get the answers to some questions that they can't find anywhere else. Because let's think about this. If they could just go online and get the answers to some key questions that might be in their mind, or we're going to introduce a question that they get an answer to, why would they want to take time? 15, 20, 30, 60 minutes to talk to somebody. They've got so much on their plate these days. People are overbooked in most situations. And so the likelihood that they're going to be willing to just take time to meet with somebody that they don't really know is pretty slim.
So I've always operated on this thinking that said that people buy from people that they know, like, and trust. Well, if they're not willing to meet with you up front, how in the world can they come to know, like, and trust you? And the answer is asynchronously, digital assets. So we have to give some thought to what are some of the questions that we would ask, or some of the things that we might say in that initial appointment, and then build that into a short video, build it into a brief, not very many pages, ebook, very brief, 4, 5, 6 pages would be great, or some other format that they could partake in and learn something from or engage with without having to interrupt their daytime. Because there's only a certain amount of slots that anybody has in their day. And most of those are taken up with internal meetings and hiring, firing, doing work, whatever their work happens to be. And so the likelihood of having time to meet with a salesperson is so low, we need to give them a chance to actually get their first lick of the ice cream, the first taste of what it might be like to do business with us after hours. So after the kids go to bed late at night, or while they're sitting in line at Wendy's, or as I always like to say, while they're on a really boring internal conference call, they can read, watch, or listen to something that we provide to them. So I just want to encourage every salesperson to think about that. What is it your customers need to know? Or what kind of questions would you pose if they were willing to sit down with you? And let's build those in to these kinds of digital assets. The one that is probably the most ignored right now is recording a custom video for a client, specifically sharing with them what they can learn if they wanted to meet with us. You see, I talk to a lot of people that are using video as an outbound prospecting tool, let's say, but what they do is they just take what they would put into an email, like, I'm calling from XYZ Corporation and I'd really like to have an appointment with you. Can I have 15 minutes of your time? Now, when you take that approach and put it into video, it's no more effective than an email. So the idea here is that I think that video simply amplifies whatever it is you're already doing with your clients, whatever you're already asking, or the impression you're already making when you send something like an email, for example. So if you're going to use video to just pitch them on, let me have 15 minutes of your time for my purposes, well, you're just going to amplify how annoying that question is and probably not going to get the answer that you want. So use short video, just 30 seconds, and you can send this across LinkedIn as a direct message, or you could post that someplace and send a link to watch it, for example. You typically can't send a video across email. The files are just too big. But you can post that even on YouTube as private, unlisted, so that that person's the only one that can see it. You don't have to have it out there for general consumption. It's one of the reasons I think every salesperson ought to have their own YouTube channel, which I'll get into in a separate video. But you can send a link then to that and make that 30 seconds. Here's what I think is effective. Make that 30 seconds a foreshadowing, or like an example, a little lick of the ice cream of what it would be like to meet with you. Which means if you've got some good diagnostic questions that you would ask, if they said, sure, you can have 15 minutes of my time, what are the things you would ask in that 15 minutes? Put them in that video. So Mr. Johnson, here's how this might sound. Mr. Johnson, I know you're super busy, but I've got a couple of key questions for you, and here they are. First question, second question. I think you're the only person at your company really that can answer those, and I was wondering if we'd have a chance to talk further about this at your convenience. So here's the idea. Rather than saying, can I have 15 minutes of your time for my purposes, we need to communicate what they get out of the conversation. So I'll come on again and talk about some more details and ideas about video and prospecting and so forth today, but I just wanted to shoot a little video here in beautiful Disney World and say hello. So good selling, everybody, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.